Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Lawrence?
Ladies and gentlemen! Welcome to the main event! This is Cinesmack! And the winner is...
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome to bout number 113 of Cinesmack, the podcast about films by filmmakers. I am your host, Mike Keeler. Joining me tonight is our panel of award-winning judges. First, filmmaker and owner of Arizona Inc. Studios, Mr. Andrew Zumwalt. Oh, he said hi.
Yay! Yay!
Second,
Our
writer,
hero.
actor, and director, Mr. Kyle Fine.
I've got two, so I'll make them real quick. Extra, read all about it. Man named Limpy Bill scales building, needs new nickname, in my opinion. And then extra, read all about it. Confederate protagonist, hard to root for in 2020.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Second, writer, or nope, that was Kyle. Third, filmmaker.
This is going to be a great episode. We should do this
Oh, yeah.
one silent.
It's going to be fantastic. Third, filmmaker and owner of Cheshire Moon Films, Mr. Timothy Haggis.
Gentlemen, let's mind our broads.
Fourth, filmmaker and owner of One Genome Short Productions, Mr.
Wow. Yeah, we should just read the title. You'll get the spelling.
Why is he so quiet?
He is quiet.
Am I quiet?
Gabe,
Like,
you turned down your microphone and not your air conditioning.
You can
I
speak
guess.
up. You can speak up, Gabe. Actually, I kind of like this.
Yeah, I'll bet you do.
Is Gabe
It is
talking?
silent
I
films,
don't
so
know.
there you go.
What?
Sound like you have like a loose wire or something.
Oh, he's got a loose wire.
Sixer?
That's not a euphemism.
All right, now that we've got Gabe's microphone fixed, let's poke the monkey, find out what we're talking about this month.
Ladies and gentlemen, clock tower climbers and caboose chasers, welcome to the main event. Tonight, two silent film stalwarts engage in a comedic clash. Who will be able to hang in for the win while the other crashes before it reaches the station? In the first corner, from 1923, written by Hal Roach and directed by Fred Newmeyer, starring Harold Lloyd, Mildred Davis, and Bill Strother. Safety last! In the second corner, from 1926, written and directed by Buster Keaton and Clyde Bruckman. Starring Buster Keaton, Marion Mack, and Glenn Cavender. The General!
So we messed with the idea of having an hour and a half of silence. Almost, and then we talked about putting the music underneath, which Andrew did for his intro, and I think it would have been great. I don't think the listeners would have listened for that long. Maybe they would have. Maybe we would have gotten hate mail, which all can be sent to Gabe Rowald.
Yes. It would have been great if it was like an hour and a half, and then at the end, we actually picked the winners. Like we announced the winners at the very end of the episode.
Oh, all right. Let's start off with our first round, which is writing.
These are really interesting categories because they're a little bit different of movies. For those who don't know, they are silent movies, so there is really no dialogue except for what you see on the screen, which is quite fascinating if you've never watched a silent movie. So if you haven't had a chance, please pick one of these up so that way you can get accustomed to something like this. Story-wise, with the writing, I guess I don't have too much to say about the general. It was definitely a interesting movie. I wasn't really attached to any of the characters, and I don't know if that was writing or if it was the acting, but I didn't really connect. It was kind of a ho-hum. There was a lot of really neat gags that I know are pretty commonplace with silent movies. The story was just kind of so hopefully people can compound on that, because I don't know. I mean, Buster Keaton, I really like him, but his story was just kind of for me. And we can talk about him a little bit in acting as well. But with Safety Last, I really enjoyed the gags and the flow of the story better. It definitely has, it's timed because, there is a lot of that female distress and relying on the man that probably is not as common, or maybe it's common, but not as common that you would see in more recent films. But it definitely had a more fun feel to it. And I really got into the goofy thing that was going to happen next and the way he was going to get out of that next, and all the just bizarre stuff that really occurred throughout the entire movie to Harold. He was fun to watch, and the movie itself really captivated me. And again, it may have been a combination of writers and the acting, but the story, I mean, it was a real basic, simple story. A man wanting to make it big so he can afford to take care of his woman. But the way that it was told was just a lot of fun. And I don't know, I really enjoyed Safety Last over the general, but I don't know, somebody throw stuff out there. I don't know. What do you guys think?
It's kind of weird, the timing of it, because I mean, the whole time I was watching the general, it was a little hard to get past the whole cheering for the Confederate Army thing. And I read in an interview with Buster Keaton about it, where he had said that he can't make heroes out of the North. Like, he felt that by making the South the hero, it's a bigger hill to climb, so it's more rewarding in the end. But it's really hard to be like, hey, I hope this train gets away so they can keep owning people. So I mean, ultimately that's what it's for, and it's really hard to separate that, especially like the fact that we're watching it now. Summer 2020 is where it's people are very sensitive to that issue anyway, and it's just in the news all the time. So that part was kind of tough. But at the same time, I think that kind of the twists and turns and the obstacles that they kept putting up, in front of him, where it was a lot of fun, and it kind of made it, you really didn't know what was going to come up next. And the story in Safety Last is a lot more straightforward, but I don't think it's any less enjoyable, because I like the stakes literally are raising throughout the movie, it's hard. I was very much engaged with the Safety Last characters and what they're going through, and I will get into that, I assume, with directing. But
I guess when you say that, like, I don't know, I felt that the general had more predictability. Like, there was things in it that I was like, oh, and now he's going to hit him with the log. Oh, he's going to get up. Oh, and I don't know if that was just I got used to the pacing that the writing was doing, or if it was bad, or I don't know, but it got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm kind of seeing what's coming next. Whereas with Safety Last, I think there was just more of that. Oh, okay. And now I did see I caught the building thing. I was like, oh, that's going to happen. But other than that, I mean, there was just all the ups and downs that were just quite humorous that I thought were quite different when you're watching the movie comparison. But
yeah, it's difficult to judge these movies because they're almost 100 years old. And it's easy to see the plotting coming and everything happening, but that's because we watched 80 years worth of movies that started here kind of and built on this stuff. So yeah, very straightforward. Both these movies are about an hour and a half long, and I think they're probably both about 20 minutes too long anyways. They repeat a lot of the same gags. And I think some of that comes down to the writing too. They're like, we got to put Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd in the theater for an hour and a half, give people time out at the movies. So they keep writing this kind of the same similar gags. It's really bad in the general. Like the same stuff keeps happening over and over again. I tried to look past the setting of the movie. I think it is weird. I don't know what the explanation is to set your hero of the movie as part of the losing side of the Civil War. I don't think that's a smart idea.
I have.
Okay.
Excuse me. Sorry. I have an explanation.
Okay, good. I just
said the fucking explanation. Is no one listening to me?
Yeah, no, that it was
just fucking said that.
tougher hill to climb because he couldn't make heroes out of the North, right?
What the hell am I doing here? Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, but no, go ahead. No, do your fucking trivia, whatever.
Hey, Kyle.
Yeah.
It's because Buster Keaton found it harder to make a Union soldier a hero since they did win, and he felt that it would be
Thanks, Mike.
a higher mountain
I'm glad
to climb.
someone can explain it on this podcast.
My God.
Wow. I was
Is that what we got tonight? Is this what we're doing tonight? Okay, fucker. We'll do it.
Well, I'm glad Buster Keaton had an excuse, but it's a stupid idea, regardless. Because there's a point in the movie very quickly where you go, good, let the fucking Union take this train. And then you're just like, okay, we got to keep watching this movie. That being said, the gags they write and the way they put them in these situations, I can't imagine having the balls to write this in 1920 and going, okay, now we got to go do this. Because I don't know how you do any of this stuff safely back then. It's not like you could hide anything with CGI. So as far as gag films go, they're good at getting from place to place in the gag, but there's not much meat on the bones.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I mean, these films were primarily visual, so I mean, it really comes down to those gags and doing those things and the performance more than it does necessarily the writing. I think they just kind of loosely wrap a story around a bunch of gags that they want to do. Apparently my mic is. Does it help if I get closer?
Oh yeah, it's helps.
Yeah, you sound good right there.
Ooh yeah.
I always like you closer
I'll
to me,
just
Gabe.
deep throat my mic.
Get closer.
I'll be right over.
Okay.
Closer.
Forget there's a guy named Mike on this podcast. Careful.
Oh.
Man. Wow.
You're welcome, Mike.
Wow.
Yeah, so I would be interested in actually seeing a screenplay from one of these movies. And according to a document from the Library of Congress, it says during the silent era, scripts at Hal Roach Studios ran only a few pages at most. The film's press book states the studio never did have a written script for Safety Last. So, yeah, my feeling is that it's mostly like, okay, it's not about. I mean, we need a little bit of story to kind of loosely motivate and tie these gags together. But it's not about telling some sort of comprehensive story necessarily, because it's really more about these performers than it is about the stories themselves. So, I don't really think there was a lot of effort put into the story. More of it goes into what we'll discuss in the next categories, the performances and the directing and all that kind of stuff. So.
All right. If you guys are done, we'll put it to a vote.
Yeah, let's get to the fun categories.
All right, Andrew.
I'm gonna go with safety last.
Gabe.
They're roughly equivalent in this category for me. Yeah, because of the Confederacy thing, I'm going to go with safety last as well.
Tom.
I'm going to go with the general to make it interesting, you fucking pricks.
Hashtag canceled.
You know what I heard? No, never mind.
Kyle.
I think this would be closer if someone could have explained why the hero was Confederate, but I'm going to go with safety last on this one because it just has a better story for what story there is there.
All right. Harold Lloyd got the idea for safety last when he saw Bill Struther climbing the Brockman building in Los Angeles as a stunt one day. Lloyd, who had a difficult time watching anyone else perform a dangerous stunt because he had no control over that situation, hid behind a corner peeking to check on Struther's progress every few moments. After Struther reached the roof, Lloyd went up and introduced himself. So that's how we got the idea.
That's how the other guy got it. Because I noticed that he was pretty, fearless and athletic as well.
Right.
The other guy. I was like, who is that guy? I don't know.
All right. The General is based on a true incident during the Civil War. In April 1862, Union agent James J. Andrews led a squad of 21 soldiers on a daring secret raid. Dressed in civilian clothes, Andrews and his men traveled by rail into the southern states. Their mission was to sabotage rail lines and disrupt the Confederate Army's supply chain. At the town of Big Shanty, Georgia, now known as Kennesaw, the raiders stole a locomotive known as the General. They headed north, tearing up track, burning covered bridges, and cutting telegraph lines along the way. William Fuller and Jeff Kane, the conductor and engineer of the General, respectively, pursued the stolen train by rail and foot. They first used a handcart, as Buster Keaton does in the film, then a small work locomotive called the Yonah, which they borrowed from a railroad work crew, and finally a full-size Confederate Army locomotive called Texas, which pursued General for 51 miles in reverse. During the chase, Confederate soldiers were able to repair the sabotaged telegraph wires and send messages ahead of the raiders. Andrew and his men were intercepted and captured near Chattanooga, Tennessee, by a squad of Confederate troops led by General Nathan Bedford Forrest. Tried as spies, Andrew and 7 of his raiders were hanged. The rest of the raiders were traded in a prisoner exchange. In 1863, the survivors of the mission were awarded the first Medals of Honor. Andrews and the raiders who had been hanged later received the medal posthumously. Although this film is a comedy, the incident was later filmed by Walt Disney as a drama, The Great Locomotive Chase, in 1956, with Fess Parker, a Southerner born in Texas, as Andrews. So there you go.
Interesting story.
It is an interesting story. Like,
I'm sorry,
I agree with you
listening.
guys. Well, Tom, it's about making a hero out of the other guy. So you have
cool.
a higher hill to climb to try and get your point across.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I had something on that. I lost my notes.
I
would argue you're making an unclimbable hill for yourself, but okay.
I'll get to the top of this bitch. You wait.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with our second round, which is acting.
Like I was saying in the previous round, I think these films are definitely more about the performances. About these guys doing these kind of crazy, fearless gags without the benefit of modern tools and safety measures. So, I think this is an important category for these films. Which one, which ones do we think the performances are better? Which ones do we think the stunts are more dangerous or more entertaining or more interesting? And when I was watching it, Safety Last has some classic gags. I mean, I think there are things that even people who aren't film buffs and don't watch silent films and that kind of thing, they recognize these things. That these gags have become kind of part of popular culture and people know them. They may not know it's Harold Lloyd or or whatever, but they do recognize those gags. But I felt like when I was watching them, I kind of enjoyed Buster Keaton's physical performances a little bit better. And I was kind of impressed. I was more impressed with like his acting, his facial expressions personally. I just found him more compelling to watch in most cases. And with Safety Last, I was kind of waiting for the gags and stunts to start. I felt like, okay, it's taking a long time for him to get to that point. And so, I was a little bit kind of underwhelmed with his performance until it got to the end when he's actually climbing up on the building and hanging off the edge and, hanging from the hands of the clock and all that kind of thing. So I personally felt like Buster Keaton's performance throughout was a little more compelling to me. But I'd like to hear what you guys have to say.
Do you think any of that has to do with the fact that Harold Lloyd is buried under like 10 pounds of white pancake makeup? Because he just looks so pale to me in this movie. I was like, oh man, so strange. But yeah, they're interesting from an acting perspective because they are silent films. So you're trying to follow their mouth movements as much as you can and trying to pick it up. But it feels like it's mostly just getting the gist of the idea, and you're not supposed to be following every exact word of dialogue as if it's important. It's kind of silent drama to the camera, and you're just supposed to follow along. The supporting actors, I feel like in Safety Last, were more featured, a little more integral to the story. Yeah. But I do agree with you with some of the stunts that Buster Keaton did. The Safety Last, like you said, has some iconic gags hanging from the clock tower. The clock is the one that sticks out to me. But putting yourself in front of a locomotive, on top of a locomotive, around a moving locomotive, I'm sure it's not, full steam ahead, and there are some safety precautions. But that literally made me scared. Like I was about to watch Buster Keaton get annihilated. Because he's jumping on the cow catchers and jumping from place to place and running along the top of it. And that just kind of freaked me out more than the climbing. I'm not sure why, but I agree with some of your sentiments. I think it's hard to judge these because there's only facial expressions and motions to be based on. You don't get any inflection or actual dialogue spoken or anything like that. And the general had very little written text on the screen to help explain things. Safety Last had a lot more whatever. Words are hard, you guys. English is a difficult language. Title cards to kind of help you move the story along. And the general had very few of them. You kind of just were watching guys run around on trains.
Yeah. Right, but that makes sense, though, because the general's plot is really driven by the action, whereas Safety Last was more driven by the conversations that he was having. So
yeah, and the general's like it got to the part that it wanted to get to, the action part, quicker, and stayed there and was like, okay, just watch us do these cool things with trains. Whereas it took a while to get to the crazy exciting parts of Safety Last when he's scaling the building.
The stunts in both of these are insane, and I just I marvel at what they came up with, and watching the videos about how they did Safety Last, it's ingenious. I mean, it ruins it a little bit. Anytime you see a behind the scenes feature, it does. But the fact that Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton put themselves in these situations is amazing. And you're like you said, I don't know if Buster Keaton gets enough credit for running around on the train like he does. And he probably, and he may have been in more danger than Harold Lloyd was, knowing how Harold Lloyd shot those scenes. But it's, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say it genuinely made me tense to watch him interact with a locomotive this way. It felt very dangerous. Where if you saw it in a movie today, you'd know this is so heavily scripted. It's so protected that there's nothing bad that can happen. Maybe Tom Cruise films it and breaks an ankle doing it or something like that. But when you're watching Buster Keaton do it, you're like, holy shit, is this Buster Keaton's only movie? Am I about to watch a snuff film?
Yeah.
Because it just looks dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm really glad somebody brought up the makeup because I was going to bring that up too. And I realize that it's partly because of the time, but holy buckets. It was like put stage makeup on these guys times 1,000 because wow.
Was that supposed to be part of the character? The character was supposed to look like that? I mean, was this...
I don't know. They were both.
I think it's just the time.
I think it's the time because both movies were like that. Both movies were heavily makeup.
Yep.
Heavily.
They're probably more used to,
stage. Yep.
And I'm just, in black and white, I'm assuming they're trying to make certain things on their face pop, and that's fine. It's just, wow. I guess I just never noticed it before when I watched Safety Last years ago. But, Buster Keaton, I've seen him do a lot of stuff. He is a fantastic actor. He's a wonderful performer. Johnny Depp even mimics a lot of his stuff. Oh my gosh, there's a movie that
Benny and June.
Thank you. It was slipping my mind. Where he mimics a lot of his performances and a lot of the things that Buster Keaton did, and he's just quite an amazing person. And you are right. It was quite scary to see him on these trains. He just wasn't as performant as I've seen him in other movies and other clips that I've seen him in. And maybe that's why it was a little more droll to me. But I don't know. Maybe I'm assuming they didn't have stunt actors back then, and this was actually them doing it. So you got to give the guy credit because, like everyone said, holy crap. Harold Lloyd just has this persona to him in the way that he acts. He just has this genuine glow when he does his movements. And again, it may have been for the story, but it's very almost over the top, but in a good way, that he just has this charisma to him that you enjoy watching. And he really, I think that's what brought me into it a little bit more. His character was just so goofy and charismatic that it just drew me in a lot more. And that's hard for me to say because, like I said, I really like Buster Keaton, and I really have seen some really amazing performances by that man. But this was not one of my favorites. But he's still good.
Right, that he carries more of the storytelling duty with his acting because it doesn't have a prop like the general to carry the action along for much of the movie.
Right.
Yeah, and I think one of the silent performers, the obvious one who really was great with his physical movements and really expressing things subtly with his face and his body was Charlie Chaplin, and I think it's hard to compare to him. He was just so good at bringing out those subtleties. But Charlie didn't do the same kinds of maniacal stunts. That maybe we're not comparing apples to apples, but I think that Charlie Chaplin is kind of like the gold standard as far as silent acting goes, from the films I've seen. So, do you guys know if these guys transitioned well to the talkie era? Because Charlie Chaplin did. seem to.
Let's see. It looks like Harold Lloyd acted clear up to 1947. Between 1938 and 1947. His last film was 1947. He's in Night of the Bear in 2019, but it must have been stock footage. It had to have been. But yeah, he made films from, holy cow.
Buster Keaton is probably, I would say, that the one movie that I'm most known for is It's a Mad, 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 Mad World.
Yes.
I remember him so well when I first saw that movie.
That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, it's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, Buster Keaton, last thing he was in was A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum in 1966. Yep.
And didn't he do, it's got to be in here, he did Pajama Party. Yeah, he also did Pajama Party, which is fantastic too.
Yep, so there you go, Gabe.
Well, I'll have to check those out. I haven't seen any of those.
Oh, yeah, watch It's a Mad World.
Yeah. I've definitely heard of it. I've just never seen it.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh, it's very, very good.
Love it.
They tried to remake it in a modern day style and
Rat Race.
didn't do as good of a job.
That's usually a bad idea.
Well, it's okay, but it's not as good as It's a Mad World.
Correct. Oh, hey, that might be an idea for about. Let me run.
Whoa!
Write that down. There you go.
I feel like The General would transition much better to a movie these days than Safety Last would.
I would agree with that. I don't think some of the gags would hold up as well in Safety Last.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Especially because we have stunts and we have CG and stuff like that. Right. People would be like, ah! Whereas that these guys are actually doing some of the things. We'll get into a little that in directing because I have my little tidbits.
But they did use the a variation of using the ambulance to get across town in Die Hard 3. So
yeah, that's true.
There was that.
Yeah,
that's good.
I feel like Jackie Chan would be kind of a modern equivalent of these guys. Where he goes out of his way to do his own stuff. And then, of course, Kyle mentioned Tom Cruise, but that's a little different.
But I would say Jackie Chan is closer to that style because he has a lot of where his fight scenes are objects around him and him just trying to avoid fighting and him jumping on things and bouncing down and coming under and flipping people over. And it's more, I wouldn't say comedic, but it's more action than it is actually him fighting. He does a lot of movies like that, and he does them very well. So I think that's a good comparison.
That's because Buster Keaton was an idol of his. Growing up.
Really?
Yeah, he used to watch all of his movies, and it totally makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense. That's insane.
I've been a big Jackie Chan fan for a long, long time, and he talks about it a lot in his biography.
That makes so much more sense now. That's fantastic.
He used to watch silent era movies a lot. Like, he would watch Safety Last and, what have you. Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and all those. Like, those were his, go-to movies. So
that makes so much sense now.
Yep, absolutely it does. All right, let's put it to a vote. Andrew, yep. No, Gabe.
I'm going to go with The General.
All right. Tom?
I'm going to ride Kyle's point on the supporting actors and give it to Safety Last.
All right. Kyle?
Just from a purely action standpoint and danger standpoint, I'll give it to The General.
All right. And Andrew?
I'm going to go with Safety Last.
All right. In the scene where Johnny and Annabelle refill the water reservoir of the train in The General, Marion Max said in an interview many years later that she had no idea that she was supposed to get drenched. Buster Keaton had not told her what was supposed to happen, so the shock you see is genuine. Audience were very disappointed she had not been wearing a white T-shirt. Speaking of which,
Dear God.
speaking of which, my wife once
Some
again
things never
decided
change.
I was working on trivia, and she had to use the computer for a little bit. And then I came back and started reading through the trivia, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to leave it. So you guys got to figure out what she added. A stuntman revealed for the first time in the television documentary Hollywood in 1980 that Harold Lloyd actually climbed a fake building facade that was constructed over another building's rooftop, positioned so the camera angle could capture the street scene below. The stuntman also revealed that he doubled for Lloyd in the long shots of him climbing the building in the distance. Up until then, even the time-life version of Safety Last that was aired on PBS contained an opening title declaring that Harold Lloyd climbed the building himself and without the use of a stuntman or trick photography. The stuntman chose to suppress his information until Lloyd's death. And yet, he did not want to detract from the danger of Lloyd's actual stunt work. Lloyd performed the majority of the stunts himself on the rigged facade over a small platform, which was built near the rooftop's edge and still had to be raised a great height to get the proper street perspective for the camera. The size of the platform did not offer much of a safety net, and had Lloyd fallen, there was the risk he could have tumbled off the platform.
Onto a big, huge, big mattress. That was all that was below. A mattress.
Yep. So
Yikes.
there you go.
Yeah.
Safety last.
Oh,
that's
no.
right.
I've been at really good springs.
Actually, on set, it is safety third. Remember that. Let's move on to our third round, which is directing.
We kind of talked about the stunts and the directing are kind of tied into each other because they perform so many of their own stunts. But capturing those stunts obviously falls to the director, and I think the way that Safety Last, I feel like, does a better job of convincing you that these stunts are really dangerous because of the way that they were, put the facades on top of the building. So if he fell, he would only fall, 10 feet as opposed to, 80. So there's that. At the same time, though, one of the things that I was really impressed with the general was that it came about a time where we didn't have a lot of the, the language of film had not yet really been established. And it would have been really easy for the general to do things like break the 180 and become kind of confusing about which train we're following and that kind of thing. And I thought the general did a really, really good job of keeping all of the action straight in terms of, who was where and where were the trains and that kind of thing. There were a couple of times where I had to try to which train am I looking at here? But for the most part, it did a really, really good job. And that's to be commended. I think one of the other things that I thought that the general did really good, and I don't know if you guys saw this on your copy. So I have the Criterion version of it, and I noticed that they used some color temperature changes for night and day. The day scenes were very warm and the night scenes were very cool, and so it was still black and white, but there were these real subtle change, sometimes not so subtle changes about how they determine night and day, which I thought was kind of clever. I don't know if that's how it was back in the day, but that's what my copy looked like. So did you guys see that? No. So
Didn't notice.
That's how it always looks for me.
Oh, really? With the blue and the yellow kind of switching back and forth?
Yeah.
Okay. So I thought that was
always
an...
see black
It's a
and white, and I'm
colorblind
just- Yeah, I was.
reference.
It keep going.
That was a colorblind joke. Okay, sorry.
You didn't see it coming, Tom.
No, I didn't. I didn't. I was blindsided.
Whoa.
So that's another thing that I thought the general did really well. The parts where the Safety Last is better are the scenes that aren't really surrounded by the stunts. I thought the stuff in the store is very funny. The stuff in his boss's office is done really, really well. Like you said, there's a lot more, intertitles to help kind of move that action along. But It puts together some very funny sequences. The other thing too that it's funny because people watch Safety Last and they instantly go to the clock scene because it's iconic and that people recognize. Even people who haven't ever seen it know that that's a scene from a silent movie. That they know enough about it that they can place it in a silent movie. But the car chase scene, in like a third of the way into Safety Last, is really it's a really fun scene. Just the stuff with the trolley and this part where he's like spread on the two cars, driving down and then hits the ground. I mean, there's some really crazy stunts that they probably couldn't get away with now. So that being said, I feel like that's like a whole sequence that just kind of gets lost in Safety Last because we always go to the building climbing scene.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. I love that bit, especially the ambulance bit.
Yeah, it's really well done and it's very funny and it keeps moving and it doesn't stop. There's a scene in, oh man, I'm gonna forget which one it was. I think it's Cops, Buster Keaton's Cops. There's another car chase scene in that one as well that's just really, really well done too. So anyway, I have said the word really 18 times, so that means I'm done.
Yeah, it's
yeah, really.
Yeah, you make a lot of interesting points. As far as shot composition choice, capturing the action, I would imagine it'd be very difficult to do with the cameras at the time. For the general, with everything moving, you probably have to build special platforms and or load up all these things on hand carts or other things to follow the tracks. I think the close confines help that. You're on a track, and there's only so much you can show. You get instant production value from the surrounding countryside and the moving train and all that stuff. Safety Last is, I don't know if it'd be fair to say better lit, but more. No, I feel like the shot choices and composition are better. And the storytelling flows a bit better, but there's a lot more of it to do because you have to carry a bigger narrative than you do with the general. I agree with you about, like I said earlier, about the gags at the beginning. I think that is one of the strongest points of the film. And there are a lot of really good, solid comedy gags in Safety Last. The mannequin gag where he has to clock in. Yeah. There's a lot of really good gags in it that are really clever. Something that would take some ingenuity and creativity to think up. They're not just the obvious ones. They would be now because they were done 100 years ago at this point. But really clever stuff. And the general used trains about as dangerously and as much as you could with trains, I suppose, at that time, other than maybe crash them into each other. But yeah, it just didn't have enough to it, and it just didn't feel as, I don't know, sophisticated isn't the right word. Maybe professional, polished. I'm not sure what the restoration is for these or how you get them presented to you now. I rented the general and watched it through Amazon Prime, and I watched Safety Last through Canopy, which had the Criterion Collection. So the music was much louder and sharper, and I'm sure they did a lot of work on that to keep that in pristine condition. So I think that might have skewed my view a bit. But that's probably something we'll talk about in overall is these movies have musical scores throughout because obviously there's no talking. So yeah, we can get to that later. But I thought as far as direction goes, I like Safety Last a little bit better, but I think they're both admirable considering the age of these films and the feat of filming them.
Yeah, I felt like with the general, I was really impressed with what they captured with these trains. They had to have cameras moving alongside the trains. They had cameras on the trains. And I feel like, with the technology of the day, that would have been far more challenging than it would be today. I mean, we could stick a GoPro on a train and, or drive a car alongside one to get the shots that we need now. But back then, I just feel like it was kind of a technological feat in order to capture some of this footage. And then they go and they drive one out on a bridge and they blow up the bridge and the train comes crashing down. Think about that.
Yeah.
Think about like, okay, this is basically one and done. I don't know. It was my understanding that there were a couple of trains that kind of that looked pretty much the same, that kind of stood in for each other. And maybe they had 2 shots at it. If the first one didn't work, okay, well, we're done with everything else. We can sacrifice the second train. But, how do you got to build another bridge, or, how do you do that? And so I felt there were a lot of like technical things with the general that were like really impressive. And, they also didn't have the luxury of like redoing a lot of shots. I'm guessing that they're the number of takes that they did for each shot was pretty low, because shooting on film was going to be a lot more expensive. It's just going to be a lot more challenging. So I was really impressed with that. I think with Safety Last, one of the things that bothered me, that there's some really great stunt sequences, but I felt at times the pacing was slow. Like maybe they stayed a little bit too long on a certain thing, like the stuff in the fabric section of the shop. And, it's like, okay, we get it. It's really busy. He's really frazzled, but this isn't really moving the story along. This is just kind of like a few, silly gags with a woman picking up a cat and putting it around her neck. And, those kinds of things. So I felt like sometimes the stunts were really well done, but other times I felt like the pacing was a little bit slow for me. They did some interesting technical things. They were dabbling in, I guess you could say, special effects. I was really impressed with the scene where he's looking at the newspaper and it's like a picture of a person, but you don't see their face. And then the guy's face fades in over it. And I thought that was, I enjoyed that. I'm like, oh, they had to think about that. And, how did they accomplish that at that time? Because did they do that in camera, or is that did they do that later? But I felt like the general, from a technical standpoint, was more impressive to me than Safety Last was.
They just used their drones to get that. Come on now.
Yeah, they just used drones.
They just pulled out their drones from the 20s. So minus all of the other stuff, I mean, you guys have pretty much covered. The only one thing I did notice was there was a lot more camera movement while you were in the shop in Safety Last, which I thought was really interesting. Everything wasn't just a straight fixed shot, so they moved the camera around a lot to show that franticness, I think, a little bit more. And I think you nailed it like perfectly, Gabe, when you said that they held on some of them really long. Because it seemed like almost a soap opera. Like they would like hit the person and that person would pause with their expression and then they would slowly fade out. And it was like, is this a soap opera? And I think that was, again, just the time. But I did notice that as well. So when we were doing a lot of visual effects study, this is my one step forward off of directing, is Safety Last was one of the things that we studied and talked about due to the fact that they did so many practical effects to make very dangerous situations come to life that weren't normally you wouldn't say were as dangerous as if he was up 16 stories hanging off of a clock. So it's really fascinating to see some of the in-camera tricks, the double exposures, the split frames that they do, so that way they mask off one side and then they unmask the other side, and vice versa. A lot of the glass paintings that they would do to put in front of the camera to make it look bigger or have something else going on in the background. The general uses glass paintings for some of their background stuff. So it's really fascinating at some of the, I would say, great grandfather stuff of visual effects that they actually did in these films with very, limited abilities. It's just amazing to me. And of course, the general, that's just all practical, them being on a train. And I'm hoping they just had a steam engine that they're like, this thing needs to be retired. And I'm assuming it's still at the bottom of that lake. I mean, is it like a movie icon? Can people go to that lake and
they had 3 of them.
They what?
They had 3 locomotives. One for the General, one for the Texas, and then a spare.
So the one that fell off the bridge, is it still sitting at the bottom of that lake?
As far as I know, it is. I didn't see any trivia about it.
Because I mean that to me, I mean, in today's world, that would never fly. So it's amazing that potentially that, almost 100-year-old movie prop is sitting at the bottom of a lake somewhere.
Absolutely.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, only a couple of directors these days would even try to do practical effects. Maybe
That's
Christopher Nolan might do that.
Yes.
And then, what's the director of Mad Max?
Of what?
The Mad Max.
Miller?
George
Miller. Yeah. He might actually crash a train.
Robert Zemeckis did for Back to the Future 3. Come on now.
Yeah.
That's at the bottom of Eastwood Gulch.
And,
Eastwood Gulch.
Yeah, and look at The Fugitive. They actually crashed a train. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's just really amazing that how much our perspective and seeing some of the stuff that they did. Even down to the fact that even if she didn't know that she was supposed to be completely drenched during the water refueling, again, would never fly. Like unions and SAG artists and everything would be like, oh, no, that's not okay. I mean, look at the big controversy over Aliens when he didn't tell them everything that was going to happen and scared the crap out of them, and they got really pissed about it. So it's an interesting look in time of movie making for both of these films.
Yes, it is. All right, time's up. Let's put it to a vote. Tom?
I'm going safety last. Yes.
All right, Kyle?
Safety last comes first in this category.
He's been waiting to say that all
Andrew?
night.
You got it.
Safety last.
Well, I'm going to go with the General.
I don't remember asking you, Gabe.
That's true.
Gabe.
But I did. I said it anyway.
All right. The $15 for a week's pay Harold Lloyd receives would equate to about $225 in 2018, or about 1 hour with a hooker in 2020.
You're not looking hard enough for deals.
Yeah, 1 hour? Like that's...
Let me guess, somebody got to those notes too.
Keaton shot...
Nice.
Aren't you supposed to haggle?
Yeah, I think you are. I've never picked one up.
There are some things you don't haggle about, You get what you pay for.
Well, with your bad back, you shouldn't pick anybody up.
Keaton shot 200,000 feet, almost 38 miles of film for the General.
Wow. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe they did shoot a lot. They did a bunch of takes, maybe. I don't know.
All right. Let's move on to our fourth and final round, which is overall.
So we've come to this. Okay. So this is something new for us. I don't remember ever doing a silent film on CineSmack before, or at least not with one I've been a part of. So it's very interesting to look at these films and imagine telling a story and sort of tying a hand behind your back. When you don't have all of your available faculties that you would normally have these days. And the fact that it works is sort of, to me, a nice distillation of the ability of art to tell a story in so many different ways. So I don't think these are two of my favorite movies by a long shot, but they were interesting experiences from a time in in filmmaking that I don't have much experience with at all. And I think it's really cool to watch these films and still be able to follow along and imagine how people in the theater felt watching these. I can't imagine what a 1920s audience would think seeing these things. We've had our eyes so opened now to how films are made that a lot of these things would have been genuinely shocking and really exciting. So I think it would have been really cool to see one of these movies live if you had a chance to do that. But I also wanted to touch on the musical score, which I thought was excellent in Safety Last. It was also pretty good in The General, but in Safety Last, I think it carries a lot of the weight of setting the tone and the mood. And that's so important in these silent films where you don't have voice to do that. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you guys. But I thought this was a really cool and interesting look at a period of time.
Yeah, and in regards to the music, I always wonder how accurate it is to what the audiences would have heard at the time, because it's my understanding, at least for a while, that they had someone in the theater actually playing. And again, from that document that I was reading from earlier, it says the audience was laughing so loudly the organist couldn't hear himself play for Safety Last. So I always wonder how accurate that music is that we're hearing with it today, because I don't know that it was always the same in every theater. I think at some point they started to compose those things and send them out, and the pianist or organist or whatever would play from set music. But I don't think it was always like that. I think sometimes they would just play whatever, and so they didn't always get the same experience. And so it makes me wonder, for these ones that we're watching today, like who chose the music and how was it chosen?
There was a note at the end of ours on The General. I'm actually pulling it up right now. Where it said that the music was like rewritten maybe 10, 15 years ago for the restoration that they did on it. And it was, I have it right here. So they like, someone had commissioned someone to redo the score.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I think it changes our experience of it too, and in some ways it may, who knows, it may improve our experience too, because again, with the benefit of modern compositional techniques for movies and having not having to play live as the movie was playing, you can time it better and those kinds of things. So,
well, it also
interesting
poses,
experience.
It poses the question of, specifically if you're in the theater and somebody was just randomly playing, does it actually change? I mean, it can change the feel of a movie. We all know that music can change a scene just by the type of music that's in the background. Could it potentially change our experience because it was composed versus what somebody actually played in a theater, or the second time you went and saw it and they played something different? Does it change the entire feel and look of it? I mean, Safety Last could have been terrible with the music that was originally scored with it, or The General was just kind of like, that music was okay, and now the music is really good because someone went through and actually composed for it. It could change the whole experience of the film, and I think that's really fascinating. That'd be like re-editing a film 5 or 6 different times and changing scenes because you didn't like them the way they were before, changing the entire outcome. This is done purely by music. So that's really fascinating that someone would take that risk.
Well, and I think it's safe to say that all 5 of us didn't get the same score, and so we all had a little bit different viewing experience. But
that's true.
That's completely possible. Yeah.
But Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin must have been aware of that and had very strict, look, this is the music you play when we show our film. But at the same time, it's still being played by a human being. I mean, there's nothing in there that's preventing a guy that just broke up from his girlfriend, playing, "Don't Go Away, Mad, Just Go Away" by Motley Crue underneath the whole thing. Is this Motley
Now,
Crue?
that would be.
It's kind of working.
Girls.
I'm guessing somebody has done this. If nobody's done this, we should do that. We should like add modern music to one of these films.
To a silent movie? Gosh, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, add Metallica or like you
Or
said,
even,
Motley Crue
or even like a modern film score, like the score from from Cliffhanger on Safety
Right.
Last.
Right.
Why did you?
Oh my
pull
God, I could
Cliffhanger?
totally see that. I could totally
Hanging
see
from
that,
the
Tom.
clock, like Cliffhanger.
I know, what
Yeah.
a weird pull though. Cliffhanger.
How about Skyscraper? It's newer.
See, but
it's a
there
movie
you
I
go.
haven't thought about in 20
Skyscraper.
years.
But it can't be. I mean, you can't put Lord of the Rings or Superman in there. That would
That'd be terrible.
that would mess it up. You'd have to find some score where people are just like, "Is this Cliffhanger?" Like,
You're just
I'm
watching
watching this.
Safety Last, and it takes about 15 minutes, and you're like, "This is definitely Cliffhanger." I don't understand.
if I had Cliffhanger, I would totally do this tonight. But I don't
my
have the
God.
score for Cliffhanger.
I can send you
this
the
does-
score,
oh.
Tom.
Yeah, Mike's probably got it.
Yeah, I'm sure Mike's got it.
This does open up to me something that I would love to see before I die, and that is a movie with a live orchestra playing the score.
I've seen
I
it.
would. Oh, have you really?
Yeah, we went and saw Prisoner of Azkaban, the Des Moines Orchestra.
Oh,
the
my
orchestra
God.
Played, and it is,
It's
it
awesome.
shakes you. They had a chorus even doing all of the vocals, and they did the sound effects, and
They
I'm
did,
It
getting
was-
goosebumps listening to you talk about this.
they did
we're-
this with
we're
Star
going-
Wars.
we're going every February from now on whenever they do a Harry Potter movie. It's so good.
They did it
Did
for
they,
Star Wars too, and it was phenomenal.
I saw they had a Star Wars thing at Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo.
a couple
Yeah.
years ago.
So-
Yeah,
Sam and I went to that actually.
Cool.
Yeah.
yeah, it's incredible.
Did they have a special version of the movie that doesn't have the soundtrack in it? It has everything else, the dialogue and the
Yes.
sound effects.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And,
the
then they
essentially.
just
video,
play the music basically.
yeah. So they loan out the screener.
Amazing.
They and the sheet music and everything. It's a package they give to city orchestras, and they perform it. And so, yeah, it is. It's really amazing how much. And I was just like, yeah, it's just the score. How much of a big difference going to make? But I mean, they hit everything. It's really just the dialogue and some of the sound effects, and everything else they produce right there on the stage.
Yeah, watching them do the sound effects with musical instruments is quite amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. I would love to see that. I would pay premium price to watch movies in that way, with a live, something like a Christopher Nolan film being live scored, or something like by Hans Zimmer. Or oh my God, I would pay top dollar to watch something like that live.
So I'm a huge Steve Jablonsky fan. Speaking of sound scores, and he did the first. Well, he's done all the Transformers movies, but they actually did a screener in L.A. where he was conducting the orchestra, playing his music during the Transformers movie, and Hans Zimmer. He was an understudy for Hans Zimmer, if I remember correctly, and Hans Zimmer was there and actually did a couple of the songs as well.
Oh,
What a crazy experience that would be to
That
see
would be
live.
awesome.
Been awesome.
They did. Des Moines Symphony Orchestra did Lord of the Rings probably 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're right.
Because they were gonna have, who did the score for that? Alan Shore,
I think so. Give me a
Pauly
second.
Shore. I don't know. But,
Pauly Shore. It was Pauly Shore.
but he was supposed
No,
to
it's,
come and conduct, and something changed, and he wasn't able to make it. But yeah, it was supposed to. I hate the fucking movie,
You
but
guys,
I know they've
it's-
done it before.
it's the Hobbit.
And we're walking, and we're walking.
The Hobbit.
Mm.
All right,
I think
where
we
were
were
we?
talked out.
Yeah, I think we might be talked out.
Over a silent film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. If there's nothing else, you guys want, yeah, Howard Shore. You are correct.
Howard Shore.
Yep.
There you go.
All
Pauly
right.
Shore's grandpa.
Let's put it to a vote then. Start with Kyle.
Oh boy, both these movies are cool feats of filmmaking, but for rewatchability and just pure enjoyment, I'm gonna go with Safety Last. I just wish someone would explain to me why a Confederate was the protagonist. If anybody has any answers, please email us.
Yeah. How did they come to that decision?
I can't even talk, Andrew.
Yeah, I would agree that both films are an amazement piece of work, especially with the stories and everything they had to go through. But I really, really enjoy Safety Last. I find it to be a much more exciting film to rewatch over and over and over again as well. So Safety Last.
All right. Tom.
Yeah, I'm also gonna go Safety Last. So I got the fight poster all done, and I wrote "fuck you guys" somewhere on the poster. So have fun looking for it.
Oh,
I bet it's real quiet.
Yeah.
Gabe.
I'm going to give them a tie. No. I'm going to actually go with the general.
You're going to go with the general. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. As a small toddler tries to break into my office, I've got a lot of overall. I thought you guys would enjoy some of this trivia. The first try at getting the cannonball to shoot out of the cannon into the cab caused the ball to shoot with too much force. To cause it to shoot into the cab of the engine correctly, Buster Keaton had to count out the grains of gunpowder with tweezers. Can you hear him in the back? Can you hear the kiddo in the background? Producer Joseph M. Schneck gave Buster Keaton $400,000 to make this film. So the production company moved with 18 freight cars of props and sets to Oregon. In the next 2 months, the town of Marietta, Georgia, was built near the Oregon town of Cottage Grove.
Huh.
Interesting.
The final battle scene sparked a small fire around the river. Buster Keaton, his crew, and the extras stopped filming to fight the fire.
Jeez.
For the scenes with the opposing armies marching, Buster Keaton had the extras, which included 500 Oregon National Guard troops, wear the gray uniforms of the Confederacy and march in one direction past the camera. Then he had them change uniforms to the Union Blues and had them march past the camera in the other direction.
That's really more of an acting or directing category trivia. Just,
It was stuff that I couldn't fit in there. Thank you, Tom.
It sounds like the general
Just
had safety last on its mind.
Oh boy. In 1919, Harold Lloyd was handed what he thought was a prop bomb, which he lit with his cigarette. It turned out to be real and exploded, blowing off Lloyd's right thumb and index finger, putting him in the hospital for months. When he recovered, he went back to making movies wearing a white glove while on screen to hide his damaged right hand. He did his stunts in this film and feet first, dangling from ledges, clocks, and windows using only 8 fingers.
what?
Wow.
Crazy, isn't it? Though Harold Lloyd's character is credited as the boy when he gets his paycheck, it clearly says Harold Lloyd. The time clock at the department store was made by what would become IBM at the time of this film. It came in models to accommodate 50, 100, or 150 employees. It worked by turning the handle, then pressing a pin into the hole by employee's number. An internal paper tape then records that number and the time. I just thought that was interesting about IBM. While showing this film at the Opera House Theater in Lake Benton, Minnesota, the manager advertised that there would be, quote-unquote, special reinforced seats with straps for hysterical persons. Doctor in attendance both nights.
Okay.
Hysterical persons.
Lake
Wow.
Benton News, June 20th, 1924. Harold Lloyd married his co-star Mildred Davis on February 10th, 1923. They remained married until her death on August 18th, 1969. They had 3 children.
Wow.
There you go. Yeah, I found a lot of interesting trivia about these. And just as being a filmmaker and also having to do very low budget, no budget films. Some of the stuff you read, you're like, oh my God, I've done that. I've had to do that. Of course, I didn't have that much money, but like you said, they were trying to figure out how this whole film thing worked. And they were figuring out all these little ideas that they could do to trick the camera. So I thought it was great.
When did the bomb situation happen? Did that happen while doing Safety Last?
No, it happened in 1919, if I remember right.
But there are shots of him with his hand exposed.
You might have to go back and watch it.
Yeah, I don't think. No.
Yeah, 1919.
Huh.
So there you go. All right. Let's move on to our recommendations for this month. And first off is Andrew.
I can't go first.
Okay, first off is Gabe.
I can go first. It's fine. It's fine.
Okay, well, I'll make it pretty quick. Or should I take more time, Andrew? Should I slow down?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Well, I watched. I'm not going to recommend a silent film or an older film. I'm going to actually recommend a pretty new one. I watched an interesting film called Archive. It's about a guy who is trying to create an AI robot to basically house the essence, if you will, of his deceased wife. And it's about him being in this remote location in Japan, where he's working on these various iterations of these robots, and he's coming up with the most lifelike one when we are first introduced to him, and it's an interesting kind of futuristic look at how we might handle death and mourning and those kinds of things. I think one of the things that struck me the most about it is the aesthetics. I really enjoyed the aesthetics. It was very reminiscent of Moon, which I've always enjoyed, and it's also reminiscent of Moon in the soundtrack. I thought the soundtrack was good, and also kind of the themes a little bit about, and it centers around a very small cast, mostly this guy who's working on these AI robots, just like Moon. So it is a little bit like Moon. So if you like that, you may like Archive as well. I wouldn't put it. I don't think it's as good as Moon, but it was really a well-crafted film and an enjoyable watch. So if you get a chance, check it out.
All right. Thanks, Gabe. Andrew, back to you.
Okay. So my recommendation for this wonderful month is not a movie. It's actually a series. It's a short series. It's only 3 episodes, but it is one that sparked a very interesting mindset for me, and that was called Generation War, and it's about World War II, but it is told from the German perspective, and it's 5 friends that are all going to war. One of them is Jewish, who obviously is not going to war, and their experience starting at the war, and it ends at the end of the war and told completely from the German perspective. It is fantastic. It sparks weird controversy in your brain, and it's very interesting. Very well done, very well acted. It's so good. There are 3 episodes, an hour and a half long. Highly, highly recommended to get a different perspective of World War II. But it's awesome. So Generation War.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Tom.
Okay, so I know we've done a silent film before. We did The Artist versus City Lights.
Correct.
And I don't know if I've recommended this one. So I try really hard not to recommend the same thing twice. But I'm going to recommend Buster Keaton's Steamboat Bill Jr. It is so good. There's a scene where a hurricane strikes, and this is another one of those iconic. This is Buster Keaton's probably iconic scene is standing when the house, the facade of the house falls over and lands, and he falls right through the window as it comes down on top of him. If you guys seen Arrested Development, Buster does the same scene.
Yes.
But anyway, so the stunts in Steamboat Bill Jr. This was done 2 movies after The General, and so he really ups his game. And the plot, I think, is a lot more defined. Let's get English. It's better developed than The General, I think. And you're not rooting for slaveholders, which is always nice to do. So I recommend Steamboat Bill Jr. My apologies if I recommended this in the past, but thanks for listening so much that you would notice.
That's a great movie.
Kyle.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, my turn? Okay, so this is another one I'm not sure if I've recommended before either, but I've been really into horror movies lately, and I'm going to recommend an old horror movie. It's called The Bride of Frankenstein. I actually saw this in a one-theater movie, or a one-theater cinema called the Iowa Theater, I believe it's called, in Winterset.
I believe you have talked about this before.
Okay, I know. I remember mentioning it, but I don't remember if I recommended it.
Okay,
because it's kind of really actually fun and kind of funny in points. Like Frankenstein gets drunk, starts doing booze, and talks to a priest. It's kind of interesting. But as far as I wanted to recommend it because it's old, it's black and white, and it kind of was reminiscent of these films. And since I've been watching so much horror stuff lately, I thought I would give that one a recommendation. If you haven't seen it, some of those old films are kind of charming.
It's a great recommendation.
Absolutely.
If you watch that,
I hope I haven't done it twice.
If you watch that and watch the first Frankenstein, and then go watch Young Frankenstein, you will just be able to pick and choose. Pick what scenes Mel Brooks grabbed from each movie and put in, put in a line for his film. It's great.
When we were in high school, we read Frankenstein, and then we watched Frankenstein, the old Universal Monsters one. Oh, yes. But I had only seen Young Frankenstein. And so the teacher's trying to show us a horror movie, and I am laughing my ass off through the whole thing. It was oh my God, this is Young Frankenstein pulled all of this stuff from it. So.
Yeah, putting on the Ritz.
Jesus, it wasn't that boring of a story.
So Andrew had mentioned Jackie Chan, and I already had this pulled up because I knew about it, but I'm going to recommend Project A from 1983. It stars Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, and Biao Yun. And it's directed by Jackie Chan and Sammo. Written by Jackie Chan, Jack Maybe, and I believe Sammo had some writing in it. They have a clock tower fight with bamboo poles all up because it's under construction, and it is phenomenal. There are shots just right out of Safety Last that Jackie Chan was inspired to do. Plus, he's adding his own stunts and fighting, and it's totally incredible. So check out Project A.
And they did a similar scene in Rush Hour 2, believe it or not.
Yes, they did. And I'm trying to remember which one he does the Buster Keaton building fall that Tom was talking about. I want to say it was Project A. It might not have been, but that might be in there as well. So get a treat. All right.
That's cool that he looked up to him.
Yes.
That was an idol. That makes it fills in so many blanks. That's a great piece. Wow.
All right. Let's poke the monkey, find out who won.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner by decision is Safety Last!
I have a question for you guys. What? If we would have done these films, say, 5 months ago or a year ago, would your opinion of The General be different?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think
I've always
it had
strongly
because
No.
I just don't think it had enough. It didn't have as much of a story. It didn't have as much going on. I watched it first and then watched Safety last, and I felt a distinct difference in the quality of the film.
Well, and not only that, but when it first started out and he was a Confederate soldier, I was just like, really? Like that's.
I felt
really
bad for him
weird.
at first because I'm like, okay, so not that I sympathize or anything, but the first thing that happens is people start pressuring him to enlist in the army, and all I'm thinking as like someone who's interested in old wars, I'm like, oh God, don't go to the Civil War.
right.
You're gonna get horribly mangled.
Yeah, I was against slavery 5 months ago. So
Well,
that's not
I was
an issue for
against
me.
it too, but it just seems like it's been more at the forefront, Tom, and a lot of the discussions that we've had about the general were, I don't know, just seemed a little skewed more towards that instead of about the film sometimes. So I was just asking a question. I'm just curious.
I
No,
may
sir.
actually be able to answer this question legitimately.
Oh yes, that's right.
Gabe
When
watched
was it-
this.
What
Oh.
episode was it that I
January.
watched the wrong one?
No,
How long ago was
Let me see.
that? I believe it was.
I believe it was.
It was The Great Dictator and
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jojo Rabbit or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, these don't even go together. I don't know why we're doing these two. And I recall even then thinking, a Confederate soldier? I think, I don't think it was, under the spotlight like it is now. It may not have resonated so strongly then. But it did seem a little bit odd. Like, why would you choose that? Because this was clearly made after the Civil War. Why would you choose to glorify someone on the losing side of a bad cause? And I'm not sure that it would have. I don't think my opinion was all that much different. I think
Okay.
we do maybe see it a little bit differently now.
That's
With a
why
little
I'm
bit clearer
asking.
lens.
I'm not saying that you guys were all pro-slavery 5 months ago or a year ago. I'm just asking, since it has been a topic in the mainstream media and on Facebook, everything else. I wanted to know, if since we are living right now in the moment where this seems bad, we also need to put ourselves in the shoes of the guys making it back then. I mean, watching the general, I didn't feel anything that was negative or that they said, we got to do this and use the N-word a lot, and it shows them
no, they
keeping
never
slaves.
put
They
any
never
of the
once put
politics
any of
of
that.
the Civil
Correct.
War into it.
No.
But I think so. If you're going to do something where you're going to tell the story, the protagonist is on the other side, what you would consider, say, the other side of the war, that works so much better on a drama than it does for a comedy. So comedy is all about rooting for someone and like overcoming odds. And if this would have been like a heist film, I think it would have been, easier maybe to look past that. You kind of have to be sympathetic in a comedy, and
Because
I don't
we've done that again. We did that earlier this year with Jojo Rabbit.
yeah, right, exactly,
But
exactly.
I'm curious how, like, even
So they are similar.
even in the 1920s, though, like there was still a lot of disdain for the South and what they did to the country during the Civil War. So I'm curious how they would have how do people receive that even then? And that would have been closer to it happening.
Right.
And it's not like.
But there was
it's
a
not
lot
like,
of-
say, Birth of a Nation.
Right.
Or something that glorified the KKK and that kind of thing. It just, on a certain level, it was almost incidental. And maybe,
Yeah, it happens to
maybe
be
part
the
of it was
story.
because that was the true story. I mean, the real
right.
story was Union soldiers trying to take a Confederate train,
And quite
Yeah,
frankly, when I read that history about it, I'm like, well, I would have wanted to hear the Union soldiers' stories, right? Even though it ends in tragedy, that is still something that you would want to listen to, or watch. So yeah,
It seems like the story of stealing the train would be more compelling than the story of trying to get it back.
Trying to get the
Does that
train
make
back,
sense?
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
The raid, the ambush, the taking of it, the trying to run away with it. That seems like the more interesting story to tell. So I just thought it was a weird choice.
Well, and I'll leave it with this. Back in the 20s and the 30s, there was a lot of revisionist history going on as far as trying to make the South look better than what it was back then. So I could see where, I mean, hell, we even had some of that growing up. It was looked upon as what they call it, the glorious cause. And it was never about, we were always told, well, it was never about slavery, it was about states' rights. And it's like, well, if your states' rights are wanting to own people, then that's wrong.
Yeah.
So, but I was just asking the question because I was curious, because I know all of us have been surrounded by the news and the discussions about this. So I just wanted to know. I wanted to ask you guys.
So, it's an interesting idea. I think it might be impossible to tell.
And I've always just
affects.
Right. And I've always been a firm believer, don't judge history until you actually understand what the times were that they were living in, right? Like what seems normal to us or absurd to us now back then was totally different. And I'm not saying that owning slaves is good. I'm just saying as far as looking at the general, trying to understand more of why Buster Keaton decided to do that story, right? Why he decided to do the story from the Confederate side, which Tom so eloquently put. He felt that it was a challenge to make the Confederate the hero.
Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
You did, I believe, very early in the
podcast.
You did?
And I think the other thing too that it's changing a couple of words, and this can be a movie about they can flip the two sides, and you can be cheering for the Union soldiers just as easily. I mean, he left so much of the politics of the Civil War out of the movie that it was inconsequential, and it would be so easy to flip the story.
Yep.
Which is why I think it's still kind of easier to accept. But I remember seeing it in college and having just kind of a, really, we're rooting for these guys, and walking away from it thinking that appreciating it for the film that it is, and not so much the history, because he leaves so much of the history out.
Correct. Yeah.
Well,
it's
from
just
the Confederate side, the Union is bad.
That's true. That's true.
It's all about perspective.
So this is just basically Buster Keaton's Suicide Squad.
Yes, it is. He did Suicide Squad before it was cool. Actually, that movie wasn't cool, so we won't talk about that. All right, where can people find you and perhaps come play your organ, Andrew?
Wow. Well, that makes it different. I need to tell people to go somewhere different then if they're going to do that. The easiest thing is just go out to ArizonaInkStudios.com. You can find all of our short films out there, as well as all of our links to all of our social media if you want to follow any of that. And of course, all the links to the wonderful podcast episodes, so you can check those directly out. It's on Arizona Inc. INKstudios.com.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Gabe?
You can check out our films on onegenomeShort.com.
Oh, it's so quiet and so short and sweet.
Is
That's
it
what
quiet
she
still?
said. Yeah,
you're quiet
How
again.
close do I have to be?
There you
There,
go.
that's good.
Ooh, and that's sexy. Keep that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, do
I'll
that.
Talk like that all the
Ooh.
next episode.
Will you
Yes.
read me a bedtime story?
Oh,
Not that kind of bedtime
this little
story.
piggy went, no, that's I don't.
I'll pick one out. There's a story. It's called The Claiming of Sleeping Beauty.
Shit, Gabe, tell people where they can find me.
Yeah, Tom's
Find
next.
Tom in my room.
Oh, Jesus.
All right, Tom.
People can find me hustling copies of The General and Safety Last, which, as of next year, The General will be public domain, and so I can make as many DVD copies as I want, and there's nothing Buster Keaton's estate can do about it.
Nice. Kyle.
Well, if you want to see my organ, I'll be setting up an OnlyFans. It's going to be pretty expensive, and you're not going to want to get anything inside of it.
All right. We would appreciate it if you could leave us a review on iTunes or whatever podcasting service you use. It helps us reach new listeners. If you like us, tell your friends. If you hate us, tell your enemies. You can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Just search Cinesmack. Make sure to keep listening after we're done, because we have a special segment by Maggie and Grover, two of Tom's kids, as they discuss who they think should win each category and who the overall winner should be. So please stay tuned for Kid Smack. We might have to change that. That sounds a little abusive. For September, also known as Level 9 of Jumanji, we are turning up the volume as Straight Outta Compton takes on Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yes!
For Gabe, Andrew,
so
Kyle,
good.
Tom, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
Da-da-da-da-da. Ba-da-ba-ba-da. Flip, 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 flip. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Kid Smack. I'm joined today with Maggie.
Hi.
And Grover.
Hi.
Maggie, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
I'm 11 years old. I like cats, and I'm going to be a mathematician for NASA when I'm older.
And Grover, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
My favorite color is brown. My favorite animal is a monkey, and I want to be a weatherman when I grow up, but I'm scared of storms, so I'm basically being my worst fear.
Interesting. Very good. All right. So you guys watched Safety Last and The General. What do you guys think of these movies?
Awesome. I like them.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Maggie, what movie do you think had the better writing?
I think The General had better writing because it was more complex.
Okay. Go on.
I think Safety Last was funnier, but The General has action, and I like action movies, so The General's better.
Very good. Very good. All right. So you both voted for The General?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. All right. So which one do you think had the better acting in it? So you have Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd are in these movies, and they did most of their own stunts, which is pretty cool, right? So Grover, who do you think who had the better acting?
I think Safety Last.
What?
Because he just like go up another level, but then he reaches to the top of the building, and then the cop is still chasing him. I like that.
Okay.
Okay. I think The General had more like stunts and things, but Safety Last was more funny, and they also did their own stunts. So I think I'll do Safety Last. Is my vote.
Cool. Did you know that Harold Lloyd only has 8 fingers?
I think you told us that before.
Yeah, but the people listening don't know. All right. Thanks. That was cool. All right. Which one do you think had better directing? So we kind of talked a little bit before we started about what directing was. So, which one did a better job of kind of relaying the story so you could follow along and, cool shots, that kind of thing. Getting the camera up on the buildings to make it look higher than it really was. So, Maggie, which one do you think had better directing?
I think Safety Last had better directing because I got lost sometimes in The General, and I couldn't tell what was going on sometimes. Like, I couldn't tell which train was which and stuff like that. So
all trains just look the same to you?
Well, no, but like in the movie it was confusing, like which ones were the bad guys and which ones were the good guys.
Okay.
Storyline was very confusing.
Okay. You're confusing me now. I have to go back and watch it. Grover, which one do you think had a better story or directing?
I like the general because the trains, like I like how the trains move and one it's on fire so it falls into the water.
That scene was crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
That was super crazy.
Crazy.
Okay, so let's go with overall. So overall, Grover, which movie do you like more?
The general.
Why?
Because the action is good, even though it's an old movie. The things that move and the trash bag part is really funny. And
The trash bag part?
yeah, where he stuffs the girl in the trash bag.
Oh, shoe sack.
Yeah,
It was a sack of shoes.
Oh yeah.
and he lost his shoe.
That was pretty cool. What about you, Maggie? Which one do you like more?
I like Safety Last better because it's more funny than the general.
It's more funny.
Yeah.
All right, so there's tons of action, there's tons of stunts in these movies. Like, what's your favorite stunt scene?
I like the part from Safety Last where my favorite stunt scene is like when he's dangling from the clock.
That one,
Safety Last.
that's pretty iconic. Like, everybody remembers seeing that. Even people who haven't seen the movie have seen that. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Grover, what about you? Favorite stunt?
Even if I watch the general again and again, I even forget it's just gonna drive right over the fire. But no, it just went boop 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 and falls into the water.
That was pretty cool. All right, so I think it's a tie. I think it was 4-4. So congratulations, both movies are equally good. Yeah. Anyway, so Maggie, do you have any recommendations for us?
Always read the book before you watch the movie.
Okay, Grover, any recommendations?
Never go camping when werewolves are out.
Okay, that's some interesting recommendations. So, Grover, where can people find you?
On your phone.
That's true. Grover and Maggie, where can people find you?
My house.
Very specific. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Did you guys enjoy this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you guys going to go off now and start your own podcast and overtake the world?
Yes.
Maybe.
Oh, it looks like you're on the same page. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for Kid Smack, title pending. Join us next week when we review Eyes Wide Shut and The Shining.
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.